The courtroom felt colder than usual that morning, the kind of cold that didn't come from the air conditioner, but from silence, heavy, sharp, almost metallic. Every sound echoed. The scratch of pens, the shuffle of papers. Even a quiet cough sounded like thunder in that still room. Alicia Carter stood by the wooden table, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She didn't blink. She couldn't, because sitting just 3 feet away was her husband, David Reynolds, the man she had loved for 12 years, now signing their divorce papers with another woman sitting right beside him. The woman was Chloe Sanders, blonde, young, perfectly composed, wearing a pearl-white suit that matched her smile, the kind of smile that wasn't friendly, but victorious. She tilted her head slightly, as if the whole thing was a show put on for her entertainment. Every flick of her wrist, every curl of her lips screamed one message: I've already won. David held his gold pen, the same one Alicia had gifted him on their 10th anniversary, between his fingers. He hesitated for a moment, glanced back at Chloe, then signed his name in one confident stroke. The sound of the pen scratching across paper sliced through the air like a blade. Chloe leaned closer, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Finally free, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Now you can have the life you deserve, David, with someone who truly fits your world. A murmur rippled across the courtroom benches. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. But the man seated at the bench, Judge Hernandez, a dignified man in his late 60s, with deep lines carved from decades of seeing the worst in people, remained still. His dark eyes studied the trio before him with quiet intensity. He'd seen men like David before, men who thought they could buy dignity, and women like Chloe who mistook arrogance for power, and women like Alicia, the ones who had given everything. He had seen them too. They were the ones people always underestimated, until it was too late. Alicia kept her chin lifted, refusing to look away. She could feel Chloe's gaze burning into her skin like acid, daring her to cry, to crumble. But she didn't. She stood there in silence, wearing a navy blue dress that had always made David say she looked as serious. Today, that seriousness was her armor. Her heart, however, was not made of steel. Inside, it screamed. Images flashed through her mind. Their first apartment in Chicago with peeling paint and broken radiators. The nights she stayed up typing his business proposals while he slept. The way he used to hold her hand when they had nothing but hope. And now, that same hand signed her away as if she were an old contract that had outlived its purpose. The clerk took the papers from David and turned toward Alicia. Mrs. Reynolds, he said softly, placing the document in front of her. Your turn to sign. For a brief second, everything slowed down. The ticking clock, the rustle of papers, even her own breath. Alicia looked at the pen lying beside the papers. Then, at David. His eyes didn't meet hers. They were fixed on Chloe. It was almost comical, the way he sat up straighter, as if trying to look more confident for the woman beside him. Alicia had seen that posture before, the same one he used in board meetings when he wanted to impress investors. She reached for the pen but didn't sign right away. Instead, she lifted her gaze to meet Judge Hernandez's eyes. Something passed between them, a wordless understanding. The judge's expression didn't change, but his gaze softened, as if he saw more than what was happening on paper. Take your time, Mrs. Reynolds, he said. Alicia nodded slowly, fingers brushing against the pen. The gold surface felt cold, foreign. She thought of all the times she'd used that same pen to sign mortgage papers, business loans, birthday cards, all for a life she thought they were building together. Then she smiled, just barely, a small, quiet smile that went unnoticed by everyone except Judge Hernandez, because in that moment, she wasn't broken. She was calculating. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. David began to tap his fingers on the table, impatience flickering across his face. Alicia, he muttered, let's not drag this out. We both know it's for the best. Chloe leaned back, crossing her legs. It's okay, she said sweetly, loud enough for the courtroom to hear. Some people have a harder time letting go. Alicia finally looked at her, eyes calm but cutting. You're right, she said softly. Letting go can be hard, especially when people don't realize what they've just lost. For a second, just 1 second, Chloe's smile faltered. The lawyer next to David cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reynolds, if you could please sign, we can all move on with our day." Alicia picked up the pen. The tip hovered above the signature line. She looked at her name, Alicia M. Reynolds, the name she had built her life around. Then she drew a deep breath and signed, slowly, gracefully, with a precision that made the letters look like carved glass. When she finished, she didn't put the pen down. She placed it neatly on the papers, straightened them, and turned to the lawyer. "There," she said. "Now it's official." David let out a breath of relief, thinking it was over. Chloe smiled again, that same triumphant smirk, the kind that said checkmate, but the judge didn't dismiss the court. He sat still, staring down at the documents as his brow furrowed slightly. He flipped a page, then another. His hand paused. David noticed. "Is there a problem, Your Honor?" Judge Hernandez looked up slowly, his voice calm but heavy with something that made the room fall silent again. "We'll get to that in a moment, Mr. Reynolds." He set the papers down, folded his hands, and leaned forward. "But before we proceed, I'd like to ask a question." Alicia didn't move. She just watched, eyes unblinking. Inside, beneath that calm surface, her pulse began to steady, not from fear, but from anticipation, because for months, she had been preparing for this moment. While David thought she was breaking, she was building. While Chloe thought she was invisible, she was observing. And while everyone expected her silence to mean surrender, it was, in truth, the sound of a storm gathering. The pen may have written her ending, but Alicia already had a different story in mind. It didn't begin in that courtroom. It began the day Alicia realized she was no longer seen, not by strangers, not even by the man who once promised to love her until his last breath, 12 years earlier. When she married David Reynolds, she thought they were equals in every sense that mattered. They had met at a college fundraiser. She was a young teacher, fresh out of grad school, and he was a startup dreamer with more ambition than money. He told her she made him feel grounded. She told him he made her feel limitless. Together, they built a small apartment into a home, filling it with laughter, secondhand furniture, and late-night plans for a future they couldn't yet afford. When David's tech company, Raytech, finally took off, Alicia cheered the loudest. She helped with early paperwork, balanced the books, and even lent him her entire savings to fund a prototype that changed everything. But as the company grew, so did the distance between them. The first time Alicia met Chloe Sanders, she didn't think much of her. Chloe had been hired as David's new marketing manager, polished, articulate, and aggressively friendly. She shook Alicia's hand and said, "You're Alicia, right? David's wife. I've heard so much about you." The way she said wife had a faint flavor of pity, like she was complimenting someone for winning an award that had long expired. At company events, Chloe always hovered near David, introducing him to clients as the visionary behind everything. When Alicia joined in conversations, Chloe would smile sweetly and say, "Oh, you're here, how lovely," before sliding between her and whoever was speaking. It was death by 1,000 cuts, small, deliberate humiliations masked as charm. One evening, during Raytech's annual charity gala, Chloe turned to Alicia in front of a group of donors and said, "I just love how confident you are wearing that color. I could never pull off such a bold tone, but I guess it goes perfectly with your heritage." The group laughed awkwardly. Someone clinked a glass. David said nothing. He didn't even flinch. That silence was the moment Alicia felt something in her break. Not completely, just a quiet crack deep inside, where love and respect used to meet. After that, she noticed how Chloe started showing up in places that used to belong to her. Company dinners, board meetings, even weekend golf outings that had nothing to do with marketing. Her friends whispered, "Don't you find it strange how close they've become?" Alicia smiled and lied through her teeth. "It's just business." But business didn't explain the perfume that lingered on David's shirts, a scent that wasn't hers. It didn't explain the expensive bracelet Chloe wore at the next gala, the same one Alicia had admired months ago, the one David said he couldn't afford. And it didn't explain the way Chloe looked at her husband now, like a prize already claimed. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself, but how comfortable they all were with it. The slow erasure of her presence, The way people at company functions looked past her, speaking to Chloe instead, as if the wife was just another outdated department. At home, David's patience grew thin. When she tried to talk about their future, he dismissed her gently at first, then sharply. "Alicia, you worry too much," he said one night. "You've always been emotional. Chloe understands my world. She gets what I'm trying to build." "And what about what we built?" she asked quietly. He sighed, not even looking up from his phone. "You've done enough. Let me handle things now." It was subtle, almost tender, the way he pushed her out of his world. But it was still exile. Chloe, meanwhile, made no effort to hide her cruelty. She posted photos of team dinners in Alicia's favorite restaurants, tagging David in every shot. In one picture, Chloe's manicured hand rested on his arm as they toasted under the caption, "To success," and to people who truly belong. Alicia stopped checking social media after that. She didn't need to see the parade of reminders that her life was being rewritten, with her erased from the story. The neighbors whispered. Friends who once came for dinner stopped calling. At the grocery store, someone she barely knew said, "I heard about what happened." "You're so strong." Alicia forced a smile, but inside she was drowning in a loneliness so vast it felt like another country. Yet, even then, something inside her refused to die. When people pitied her, she smiled. When David ignored her, she listened. When Chloe humiliated her, she memorized every word. Every insult was a brick, every whisper, mortar. She was building something, not revenge, not yet, but understanding. The kind that comes when you finally see the truth without denial. One evening, as rain drummed softly against the windows, Alicia sat alone in the living room. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on her notebook, the same one she used to plan David's product launches. Now, she used it for something else. She wrote down dates, conversations, bank transfers, odd receipts left in his coat pockets. Her handwriting was calm, neat, deliberate. For months, she had been treated like a woman who didn't belong. Now, she was preparing to show them what happens when someone like her stops asking for permission to exist. And yet, outwardly, she remained exactly what they wanted her to be: quiet, polite, defeated. At the next company anniversary, Chloe hosted the event at a private country club just outside Atlanta. The crowd was nearly all white, draped in pearls and pride. Alicia arrived alone, walking in a black dress that looked simple until the light hit it. Then it shimmered like obsidian. Chloe spotted her from across the room, feigned surprise, and said into the microphone, "Oh, what a pleasant surprise. Everyone, this is Alicia, David's wife. Isn't it inspiring how inclusive he is in his personal choices?" A few people laughed. A few looked away. Alicia stood still, smiling faintly. Her heart raced, but she refused to show it. She met Chloe's eyes and said evenly, "Thank you, Chloe. You've always had a way with words." Then she turned and walked away before anyone could react, because the truth was, she didn't need to fight, not yet. A storm doesn't argue with the sky before it breaks. It gathers quietly. And that night, as thunder rolled far off over Atlanta, Alicia Carter began gathering. The morning it finally broke wasn't stormy or dramatic. It was clear, quiet, painfully ordinary, the kind of morning that makes betrayal sting more, because the world dares to look normal while yours is falling apart. Alicia was packing David's suit for another so-called conference trip. She folded his shirts with practiced precision, the way she used to when love was still part of the ritual. The scent of his cologne, once comforting, now made her stomach twist. "Don't wait up," David said, slipping his watch onto his wrist. "The flight's early. I'll text when I land in New York." "Of course," she replied, not looking up. He kissed her cheek, out of habit, not affection, and left. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. Alicia sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-empty closet. The weight of 12 years pressed on her chest. All the small choices, all the little surrenders, she could see now how they had led here. Still, she waited for his text. It came 3 hours later, landed safe, meeting investors tonight. But 2 hours after that, as she scrolled through her phone out of restless habit, a notification popped up. Chloe Sanders tagged David Reynolds in a post. The photo hit like a slap. David and Chloe sat on a balcony overlooking the ocean, wine glasses in hand, laughing under the Florida sun. The caption read, "Business is better when the company's perfect." Her thumb hovered over the screen. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Not from surprise, she'd known for months, but from the raw finality of seeing it so public. So careless for a few seconds, Alicia couldn't breathe. Then she laughed softly. A dry, disbelieving laugh. It was absurd, really, how openly they flaunted what had been built on deceit. She put down her phone and whispered, "All right, then." That night, she poured herself a glass of red wine and opened her notebook, the one filled with neat handwriting and quiet fury. She added a date and wrote, "Miami, 8:42 p.m., not New York, not investors." She drew a small checkmark beside it. Evidence. 2 weeks later, the betrayal turned public. It started when Raytech hosted a charity auction at a downtown Atlanta hotel. Alicia almost didn't go. She told herself she was done with these humiliating spectacles. But something inside her whispered, "Go." When she arrived, the chandelier light hit her dark skin like polished bronze. Heads turned, some out of pity, some out of guilt. She ignored them all. Then she saw it. Chloe, standing beside David, her hand resting lightly on his arm, wearing a silver dress that clung to her like arrogance. The photographers swarmed them. "Mr. Reynolds, one more photo." "Over here." David smiled for the cameras, then caught sight of Alicia across the room. His expression flickered, just for a second, from surprise to discomfort. Then he straightened and guided Chloe toward the stage. When it was his turn to speak, he held the microphone and said, "At Raytech, we believe in building bridges, in creating a future that's inclusive, diverse, and forward-thinking." Alicia nearly choked on her drink. Inclusive. The word hung in the air like a cruel joke. Then Chloe took the stage. "And that spirit of inclusion," she said, pausing for effect, "is something David also lives by, even in his personal life." She smiled innocently. "It's inspiring, really, how he embraces people from all backgrounds, even when it can be socially challenging." The audience tittered, nervous laughter, half sympathetic, half curious. Alicia felt her pulse in her ears. Every eye turned toward her, pitying, judging, dissecting. David didn't stop Chloe. He didn't even flinch. Alicia stood up quietly and walked out before anyone could see the tears burning in her eyes. Outside, the night air was cool, the city lights blurred by unshed tears. She leaned against a lamppost, breathing slowly, forcing her heart to steady. She wasn't going to break, not here, not for them. As she stared into the reflection of traffic lights on the wet pavement, one thought surfaced, calm and clear. If they want to turn this into a show, I'll write the script myself. The next day, she confronted David. "Why didn't you stop her?" she asked, voice low. "You let her humiliate me in front of everyone." David exhaled, weary, annoyed. "Alicia, not everything's about you. Chloe didn't mean it that way. She practically called me your charity case." "You're twisting her words. You've always been too sensitive about." He stopped, lowering his voice. "About race." That word hung between them like smoke. Alicia froze. "Say it," she whispered. "Too sensitive about what, David?" He rubbed his forehead. "You see discrimination everywhere. Maybe that's the problem." She stared at him, at the man she had defended to her family, the man she had believed in when no one else did. "The problem," she said quietly, "is that you stopped seeing it at all." He turned away. "You know what? Maybe this isn't working because we're just different people now, different." Another word dressed in civility, but soaked in poison. Alicia wanted to scream, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled. "You're right, David. We are different." When he left for the office that morning, he didn't notice her standing by the window, watching him drive away. Her hands were steady now. Her fear was gone. At school, her co-workers noticed the change. She spoke less, but when she did, her voice carried quiet weight. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. The principal, a polite woman from an old Southern family, asked, "Are you doing all right, Alicia? You seem different." "I'm fine," she said. And she meant it. Because for the first time, she wasn't trying to survive the humiliation. She was studying it. She started saving every message, every financial statement, every photo that crossed her path. Her phone became a vault, her mind a weapon sharpening itself. And when she overheard David on the phone one night, whispering, "She'll sign anything once she's tired enough," Alicia quietly smiled to herself. He thought she was tired. He thought she was broken. He thought she didn't have the strength to fight. But Alicia Carter had been underestimated her whole life, as a teacher, as a wife, as a black woman in rooms full of people who smiled through their prejudice. This time, they weren't facing the woman they thought they could erase. They were facing someone who had learned how to wait and how to win that weekend. She sat at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee in one hand, her notebook open in front of her. The rain tapped softly on the window, the same rhythm it had the night she first decided to start writing things down. She turned a page and wrote a single line in neat, deliberate letters. "They think I'm broken. They have no idea I'm just getting started." She underlined it once, then twice. The day Alicia discovered the truth, it wasn't through confession or rumor. It was through numbers, cold, mechanical, undeniable. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot, addressed to David Reynolds and Alicia Reynolds. Nothing unusual, until she noticed the seal from the bank. She almost tossed it aside, but something, instinct, perhaps, made her tear it open. Inside was a notice about a home equity loan, a large one, approved 2 months earlier. Her name was on it. Her signature wasn't. For a long time, Alicia just stared at the paper, her pulse steady but her stomach sinking. The room seemed to shrink, the light bending around her in a dizzy blur. Then she exhaled slowly and whispered, "All right, let's see what you've done." At the downtown branch of Mid-South Bank, the air smelled faintly of printer ink and air conditioning. Alicia stood in line, her hands wrapped tightly around her purse. When it was her turn, the manager, a polite older man with rimless glasses, greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Reynolds, good morning. How can I help you?" She placed the letter on his desk. "I'd like to review this loan, please. It's in both our names, but I didn't authorize it." The manager, whose nameplate read Mr. Thompson, adjusted his glasses and skimmed the page. His friendly expression faltered slightly. "Ah, I see. One moment, please." He disappeared into a back office. Through the glass walls, Alicia could see him whispering to another employee, both of them glancing at her nervously. After a few minutes, he returned with a folder, but not the same easy smile. "Mrs. Reynolds," he began cautiously, "this was processed by your husband, Mr. David Reynolds." He presented power of attorney documents that allowed him to sign on your behalf. "Power of attorney?" she repeated, frowning. "I never signed anything like that." Mr. Thompson hesitated. "I understand, but the file shows both signatures." He slid the papers across. Alicia looked down at the signatures. Hers was perfect to perfect, a flawless copy. She felt her breath catch, but her face didn't change. "Can you tell me what this loan was used for?" He hesitated again, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Reynolds, it might be best to discuss this with your husband." Alicia's tone hardened just slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I have a right to know where our money is going." That word "our" seemed to break through his discomfort. He sighed, then flipped open the folder. There were several transfers, about $180,000 total, wired to a personal account belonging to. "Let me see." He trailed off. Alicia watched his eyes. "Go ahead," she said. He cleared his throat. "To a Ms. Chloe Sanders." The world went silent. Not the kind of silence that roars, but the kind that's sharp, surgical, the kind that cuts clean through illusion. Alicia sat back in the chair. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That's very helpful." He blinked, startled. "Mrs. Reynolds, if I may, it seems your husband also inquired last week about transferring your joint assets into an individual account. He mentioned you'd agreed to sign the divorce settlement privately. I assumed I haven't signed anything yet." Alicia interrupted quietly. Her voice was calm, but her heart beat like thunder under her ribs. She rose, smoothing her skirt. "You've done the right thing telling me, Mr. Thompson. Please don't mention this conversation to my husband." He nodded quickly, visibly uneasy. "Of course, ma'am." As Alicia walked out of the bank, the sun hit her face, warm and blinding. She didn't flinch. For the first time in months, she felt something new rising in her chest, not sadness, not rage. Clarity. He was stealing everything. But he'd just handed her the map. That night, David called from what he claimed was a conference in Boston. "How's the trip?" she asked softly, keeping her voice level. "Productive," he said. "I'm learning a lot from the partners here." "That's good," she replied. "I'm proud of you, David." There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone realizes the script has changed. He hadn't expected kindness. He'd expected confrontation. "Thanks," he said uncertainly. "Listen, when I get back, we should talk." "I agree," Alicia said. "I'll be ready." When she hung up, she set the phone down gently and stared at it. Her reflection in the dark screen didn't look like the woman he thought he'd broken. It looked like someone who had finally stopped bleeding. The next morning, Alicia walked into a downtown office building made of glass and marble. The sign by the door read, "Leon and Vega, attorneys at law." The receptionist smiled. "Do you have an appointment?" "Not yet," Alicia said. "But I need to speak with someone who specializes in divorce and asset fraud." 10 minutes later, she was sitting across from attorney Marisol Vega, a woman in her mid-40s with caramel skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Marisol listened quietly as Alicia told her everything. The affair, the humiliation, the fake documents, the bank transfers. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Marisol leaned back in her chair and said, "Men like your husband think they're playing chess, but they're actually playing checkers." Alicia frowned. "Meaning?" Marisol's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "Meaning, they think 10 moves ahead. We think 50. She opened a folder and began jotting notes. "Here's what we'll do. You'll keep pretending to be exactly what they expect. The tired, heartbroken wife. Meanwhile, we'll document everything. Every transaction, every message, every lie. He's digging his own grave. We're just going to hand him the shovel." Alicia nodded slowly. "And Chloe?" Marisol smiled again, sharp as glass. "We'll let her keep posting. Women like that can't help showing off. Every photo she uploads will become a piece of evidence." Alicia let out a quiet laugh, small, but real. "The first in months." Marisol leaned forward. "Listen, Alicia, they underestimated the wrong woman. You have what most people don't: proof, patience, and purpose. That's all you need." Outside the window, the city roared, cars, sirens, voices, life moving fast and loud. But inside that quiet office, time seemed to slow. For the first time since her world had collapsed, Alicia didn't feel small. She felt sharp, focused, alive. As she left the building, she caught her reflection in the glass doors. No longer the polite woman fading into the background, but someone reborn in quiet fire. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, she whispered to herself, "He thinks this is the end. He has no idea it's just the opening move." From that day forward, Alicia Carter became to women. There was the one David saw, soft-spoken, agreeable, defeated. The woman who nodded during conversations, cooked his favorite meals, and agreed that maybe this divorce really was for the best. The woman he pitied. The woman he believed had given up. And then there was the other Alicia, the one who woke before sunrise, her heart steady, her mind razor-sharp. The one who met secretly with attorney Marisol Vega every Friday morning at a quiet cafe near Peachtree Street. The one who turned every humiliation into ammunition. It wasn't revenge she was after. Not exactly. It was truth. Cold, undeniable truth that would leave no room for pity, no exit for lies. David came home from his business trips more often now, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of habit. Each time, Alicia greeted him with the same calm smile that made him feel comfortable enough to speak. "Freely, you know," he said one evening over dinner, swirling a glass of wine. "I really admire how mature you're being about all this." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, David. I've been thinking a lot lately. Maybe you're right. Maybe we both need to move on." The relief on his face was almost comical. He leaned back, exhaling. "I'm glad you see that. I just want things to stay civil, you know? I'll make sure you're taken care of." "Of course," she said softly. "I trust you." He smiled, the same smile he once used to charm investors and win clients. He had no idea he'd just confessed to the one person who'd already outplayed him. Later that night, Alicia slipped her phone onto the kitchen counter. The small red light blinked once, recording. David's voice echoed faintly from the living room. Jessica thinks once this is over, I can focus fully on expansion. She says it's time to stop feeling guilty and start living my life. Alicia's heart didn't even flinch anymore. She stirred the pot on the stove, her face calm. Jessica gives you good advice, she said. Yeah, he replied. She understands my world. You know, I think she's the kind of person who fits where I'm going. No offense, none taken, Alicia said evenly, her hands steady on the ladle. We all belong where we're understood. He didn't hear the quiet click of her phone stopping the recording. He didn't see the faint smile that crossed her lips. Every week, Alicia and Marisol went through what they called the list: bank transfers, screenshots of Chloe's Instagram posts, dinners, vacations, champagne toasts, a photo of a diamond bracelet captioned "Finally living the life I deserve," emails between David and his accountant discussing how to minimize spousal claims, and the newest piece, a recording of David speaking Chloe's name while discussing business assets. Marisol flipped through the folder, impressed. You have a gift for this, Alicia. Most people come to me broken. You came to me prepared. Alicia sipped her coffee, eyes calm. When they treat you like you don't belong long enough, you learn to listen better than anyone else. Marisol smiled. You're a lioness pretending to be a lamb. Keep it that way. The more relaxed he feels, the bigger the mistakes he'll make. And he did. 2 weeks later, David told her over breakfast, I've spoken to my lawyer about the division of assets. Once you sign, you'll get the house and a settlement. Generous, really. I want to be fair. Alicia folded her napkin neatly. That's kind of you. He looked relieved. It'll make everything smoother. And Chloe. He stopped himself too late. Alicia tilted her head slightly. Chloe. He coughed. She just thinks it's better if things end peacefully. For everyone, of course, Alicia said softly. For everyone. Inside, she was marking another mental note. Chloe is involved in financial discussions. Direct connection confirmed. That night, she emailed Marisol. Phase 2. He's comfortable. He's talking freely. We move next week. David mistook Alicia's calm for acceptance. He even began inviting her to social events again. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe to show the world how civilized their separation was. At a school charity fundraiser, Chloe appeared in a gold dress that shimmered under the lights. Her arm hooked through David's like a trophy. When she saw Alicia, her smile widened. Alicia, darling, you look so composed. I admire that. It must be freeing not to have to pretend anymore. Alicia turned to her with serene composure. You're right. Pretending is exhausting. Chloe blinked, not catching the undertone. Exactly, she said brightly. I'm glad we understand each other. Oh, Alicia replied, her voice soft but cutting. We will. That night, Marisol texted her. The timing's perfect. Court date confirmed. 3 weeks from Friday. Alicia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house felt unfamiliar, hollowed out by deceit. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Every beat of her heart matched the rhythm of her plan. Steady, deliberate. David stirred beside her, oblivious. He muttered something in his sleep about contracts and clean exits. She turned toward him, studying his face. The man she'd once loved had become a stranger wearing his skin. But she didn't feel hatred, only a strange detachment. Like a scientist observing her subject, she whispered into the dark, You think I'm done, David, but you're just one signature away from losing everything. The next morning, she prepared his breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, just the way he liked it. She smiled as he walked into the kitchen, still groggy. You're amazing, he said, sitting down. After everything, you're still so kind. I told you, she said sweetly. Life's too short to live angry. He nodded, smiling. Exactly. As he ate, she slipped her phone beside his cup, recording again, as he explained his plans for the company. Once this is finalized, he said between bites, I'll rebrand, merge with Chloe's firm. The future's bright. Alicia smiled. I'm sure it is. Later that afternoon, she labeled the file, David_confession3.mp3, and uploaded it to Marisol's encrypted folder. When the final meeting with David's lawyer came, Alicia dressed simply, cream blouse, black blazer, minimal makeup. She looked every bit the weary wife ready to move on. The lawyer handed her the preliminary documents, smiling condescendingly. "Mrs. Reynolds, if you sign here, we can make this quick and civilized." Alicia held the pen, glanced at David, relaxed, confident, and said softly, "Of course." Her hand moved gracefully across the paper, her signature clean and deliberate. David exhaled, relieved. "Thank you, Alicia. Really, you're handling this better than I expected." She looked up, eyes calm but sharp as glass. "Don't thank me yet, David. The best is still to come." He laughed lightly, thinking she was joking, but when she turned away, her smile faded into something else, something colder, fiercer, alive, because the lioness was fully awake now, and the hunt had just begun. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm that had been gathering for months, silent at first, then roaring to life. Alicia woke before dawn. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in a gray haze that matched the calm in her chest. She brewed a pot of coffee, watching steam rise in soft spirals, and stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. No fear, no anger, just clarity. She slipped on her navy suit, tied her hair neatly, and placed a simple gold bracelet around her wrist, the same one she'd worn on her wedding day. A small reminder of what was once real and what would end today. By the time she arrived at the courthouse, the sky had turned heavy with rain clouds. It was poetic, she thought. Endings often came with thunder. David and Chloe were already there, standing at the far end of the corridor like a scene rehearsed for public display. Chloe wore white again, always white, her confidence radiating through every polished gesture. David adjusted his tie, whispering something that made her giggle. Alicia walked past them without a glance. Inside the courtroom, Judge Hernandez presided again, the same man who had watched silently the day David signed those papers. His presence filled the room like gravity, calm, unmovable, impossible to ignore. The bailiff called the case, Reynolds versus Reynolds. Chairs creaked, papers rustled, tension pressed down like heat. David's lawyer, a tall, confident man in a charcoal suit, stood first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward, uncontested divorce. My client and Mrs. Reynolds have agreed on the terms amicably." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer continued. "The documents were reviewed and signed by both parties. We're simply here to formalize the arrangement." Judge Hernandez nodded slowly and turned toward Alicia and Marisol Vega. "Does the defense concur?" Marisol smiled faintly. "For now, Your Honor, we're content to let the documents speak for themselves." David leaned back, smug. Chloe crossed her legs, fanning herself lazily. For a moment, the atmosphere felt to still, the calm before a break in the sky. The judge began flipping through the agreement, scanning each page carefully. Then he stopped, his brows furrowed. The air shifted. "Mr. Reynolds," he said finally, his tone deceptively mild, "may I ask if you reviewed this document before signing it?" David frowned, glancing at his lawyer. "Of course, Your Honor. It's a simple division of property minus 50/50ths, as discussed." Judge Hernandez's gaze didn't waver. "Interesting, because according to what I see here, you have just agreed to transfer 80% of your marital assets to your wife, along with lifetime alimony payments of $8,000 a month." A heavy silence fell over the room. Chloe froze mid-fan. David blinked as if the words had been spoken in another language. "I'm sorry, what?" The judge looked up. 80%, Mr. Reynolds, that's quite generous, wouldn't you say?" "That's not what David stammered, turning to his lawyer. "That's not the document we prepared." Marisol rose slowly, her expression serene. "With all due respect, Your Honor, it is the document Mr. Reynolds signed, and I have every reason to believe he did so knowingly." Chloe shot up from her chair. "That's impossible. David, you told me everything was handled." Judge Hernandez banged his gavel once, sharp. "Ms. Sanders, you will remain silent unless addressed." But Marisol's voice carried effortlessly across the chaos. "Your Honor, if I may clarify, my client, Mrs. Reynolds, has been the victim of months of financial misconduct. What happened here today is not merely a mistake, It's justice finally. Finding its way to paper, the judge gestured for her to proceed. Marisol opened her leather briefcase and began laying documents on the table one by one, like cards in a winning hand. Here, she said, her tone razor smooth. We have bank statements showing unauthorized transfers totaling to $147. Zero to an account under the name of Ms. Chloe Sanders. Chloe turned pale. That's a lie. Marisol didn't stop. We also have audio recordings of Mr. Reynolds discussing the concealment of marital assets and openly admitting to fraud. David's voice filled the courtroom from a small speaker on the desk. She's too tired to fight. Once she signs, I'll transfer the rest quietly. Chloe deserves better than to live off scraps. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. David shot to his feet. That was taken out of context. Judge Hernandez's gaze was ice. Sit down, Mr. Reynolds. He did. Marisol wasn't finished. We also have screenshots from Ms. Sanders' social media, where she proudly displays jewelry and vacations funded by these stolen assets. One post reads, and I quote, "Finally living the life I deserve. #new chapter #life upgrade." Single quotes. She handed the printout to the judge. The older man stared at it for a moment, his jaw tightening. Ms. Sanders, did you write this? Chloe's voice trembled. It was just a post. I didn't mean, the judge cut her off. You meant exactly what you wrote. Marisol's voice rose, measured but electric. Your Honor, we also discovered that Mr. Reynolds used the marital home as collateral for loans intended to finance his mistress's lifestyle, all without my client's consent. We have the loan documents and the falsified signatures right here. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. David buried his face in his hands. Chloe looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. You said it was legal. She hissed. The judge leaned forward, his voice like rolling thunder. Mr. Reynolds, not only did you attempt to defraud your wife, but you had the audacity to bring your accomplice into this courtroom, as if she were a trophy. David opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Marisol turned to Alicia, nodding subtly. Would you like to say anything, Mrs. Reynolds? Alicia rose slowly. Every eye in the courtroom followed her. She stood tall, calm, dignified, untouchable. Only this, Your Honor, she said. I loved a man who taught me everything I should never accept. I trusted him with my life, my savings, and my dreams. Today, I trust this court to remind him, and anyone like him, that education doesn't come from where we're born, but from what we survive. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, but in the stillness that followed, it struck like a hammer. Judge Hernandez nodded solemnly. Well said, Mrs. Reynolds. He lifted his gavel. Based on the evidence presented, I hereby rule that this divorce is contentious, not consensual. I order the immediate freezing of all Mr. Reynolds' accounts, the reversal of all unauthorized transfers, and a full investigation for marital fraud. The gavel came down, one clean, resounding strike. Chloe collapsed back into her chair, whispering, Oh my God, what have we done? David stood trembling, pale as paper. How did you know? He croaked, staring at Alicia as though she were something supernatural. She met his eyes with quiet precision. You underestimated me, David. You thought silence meant weakness. But silence, she said, turning to leave, was just me sharpening my blade. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked out beside Marisol. Behind her, Chloe sobbed and David called her name, voice breaking. Alicia didn't look back. Not once. As the doors closed behind her, thunder cracked outside, a perfect echo to the sound of her freedom. 6 months later, the city looked different, or maybe Alicia did. The same skyline that once towered over her now felt like an ally, solid, unapologetic, alive. The news of the court case had spread fast. Raytex investors pulled out within weeks. The press called it one of the most humiliating corporate divorces in Atlanta's history. David Reynolds went from being featured in Business Weekly to having his accounts frozen, and his name whispered in pity. The company collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, and Alicia Carter, the woman they had tried to erase, quietly built something new. Her office sat on the 12th floor of a glass tower, overlooking Centennial Park, The nameplate by the door read, Carter Consulting Group, Diversity and Inclusion Strategies. Inside, the walls were painted warm gold, with framed quotes from women she admired: Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, Michelle Obama. On the shelf behind her desk stood a small plaque that read, Turn iron into steel. That had been Marisol's idea. You didn't just win a divorce case, her lawyer had told her. You turn pain into power. That's rarer than money, and it was true. Her firm had already signed 3 corporate clients, companies that wanted help creating workplaces where people like her didn't have to apologize for existing. She was busy, fulfilled, and for the first time in years, free. Marisol called one morning with good news. The final settlement's through. You officially own 70% of the assets, including the house, and the court approved $180,000 in restitution for emotional damages. Alicia smiled faintly. It's strange, she said. Money used to mean survival. Now it just feels like punctuation. What do you mean? It's the full stop at the end of a story that's finally over. Marisol chuckled softly. Then here's to the next one. David didn't fare as well. His fraud investigation revealed layers of deception beyond what even Alicia had known. Unpaid taxes, hidden accounts, inflated contracts. His reputation disintegrated overnight. He sold his car, then his furniture. Chloe left within a month of the ruling, posting a long, teary statement online about learning to start over. It didn't help. Screenshots of her lavish lifestyle flooded the internet with mocking captions. Life upgrade? Not anymore. When the memes hit, Alicia didn't laugh. She didn't need to. Life had already handled the comedy for her. One evening, she left work late. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle that softened the city's noise. As she stepped into the elevator, she heard someone call her name, Alicia. She turned. David stood there, damp from the rain, his tie loose, his eyes tired. For a moment, they just looked at each other, not as enemies, not even as lovers who'd lost their way, but as to people standing in the wreckage of something they'd both built. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said quietly, for everything. I was stupid. I don't know what I thought. Alicia studied him. He looked smaller now, not just physically, but in spirit. The confidence, the arrogance, the smooth certainty, all gone. David, she said softly, you didn't destroy me. He blinked, confused. You forced me to discover my strength, and for that, I suppose, I should thank you. She stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut between them before he could respond. A few months later, she was invited to speak at a university conference on resilience and leadership. When she stepped onto the stage, 1,000 faces looked up, students, professionals, women who had been betrayed, dismissed, overlooked. She took a breath, the microphone cool in her hand, and began. True education, she said, doesn't come from privilege or comfort. It comes from surviving what was meant to break you. It comes from learning to turn iron into steel. The audience was silent, not the restless silence of politeness, but the deep kind. The kind that means every word has landed where it was meant to. She smiled, continuing, I once thought revenge meant destroying the people who hurt me, but it isn't. Real revenge is living in a way they'll never reach, with integrity, with peace, with joy. Because when you rebuild yourself from the ashes, you stop chasing closure. You become it. Applause filled the hall, thunderous. Rising like a wave, Alicia looked out at the crowd, her heart swelling not with pride, but with something pure, peace. Later that night, she stood by her office window, the city shimmering below, rain streaking the glass. She thought of everything that had led her here, the quiet humiliation, the lies, the courtroom. All of it had burned her down to her core. But from that core, something stronger had grown. Her assistant knocked softly. Ms. Carter, are you heading out? In a bit, she said, just finishing something. When she was alone again, she opened her notebook, the same one she'd used to document every betrayal. Most of the pages were filled with evidence and pain. But now, she turned to a blank one. At the top, she wrote, New Beginnings, and beneath it, never underestimate a woman who's been underestimated her whole life. She closed the notebook, placed it on the desk, and turned off the lights. As she walked out into the rain, her heels clicking against the pavement, She felt no bitterness, no regret, only the quiet, steady rhythm of freedom. For the first time in years, Alicia Carter didn't need anyone's permission to exist, because she had already rewritten her story, and this time, she owned every word.